It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a new day, and I've been out and about. Taking a look at the financial situation, made me conclude that my best option is actually going to be pre-drinking for the next couple of days, or the next couple of shows, sorry. Um, and there's a show tomorrow and a show tonight, so there's a holiday in Canada on it falls on the 23rd this year, but it's meant to celebrate the Queen Victoria's birthday, which was the Queen of England in the Victorian period. You know, the famous Queen Victoria. We get a holiday for that. What it means is that the liquor store's closed tomorrow. So after crunching the numbers, it makes sense for me to do that tonight before the show. I'll bring that to the show tomorrow, and then that'll be the last show. And that should more or less take care of the alcohol. I also bought my bus tickets, which means I've got something like $5 left for the month. Well, I'm going to spend the $5 on a show. I'm pretty much out of cash for the month. That's fine. It's the 22nd today. I've got food. I've got everything I need. I just paid it forward a little. I gotta get something to eat. Chances of getting anything done today are low, but we'll see what I feel like when I get home. I think I'm planning on grilling it up a little for tomorrow. We'll find out when the time comes. But that's the plan anyways. Right now, like I say, I'm getting something to eat. The air situation down here is still a little funny, so I'm gonna get the window open. Yeah, that's the plan for the day. Just eat. By the time I'm done eating, I'll be like 6. And I'll probably just do a little bit of editing, and then we'll see what I feel like when I get home. He's again pretty much on point. If you strip away the spin, the way the process ought to work is like this. If somebody gets to the minimum threshold, that is 2,383 delegates with pledged delegates, then they've won the primary. If nobody gets there, and the primary process has actually resulted in a tie, the convention then needs to put together tie-breaking procedures, which is going to include appealing to the superdelegates. It's not a semantic point. I don't think the idea of superdelegates is undemocratic. It's actually really very Jeffersonian in the sense of it being a check on the process. You could even argue that there's a parallel in representative democracy. In a sense, that's what it is, right? We can get into this in a lot of different ways. The British parliamentary system was never designed to have any kind of concept of direct democracy. It was always about representatives. It was about people electing representatives and then allowing those representatives to make choices, right? Most of the superdelegates are in fact elected. They were not elected for that purpose, but they were elected at some point. Or so what they are former party members or sitting party members, right? So the superdelegates would include the current House members, former House members, and et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, essentially all of them have been elected at some point or another, but not for that purpose, right? So even the idea of calling them unelected isn't really right. But I mean, if you look at the American system and how it's about checks and balances, the superdelegates make, like I say, they might not make sense to you if you're looking at democracy as a concept of direct democracy, but in the context of what American democracy is, it makes perfect sense. This is kind of a long debate, a long winding debate about American history that there's not really any reason to get into, other than to point out that it's very much in the tradition of the United States and the system that the United States has had in place for however many centuries, right? And if you want a good example of what the superdelegates would be used for, let's say that somebody crazy like Donald Trump is leading going into the convention. That's what a superdelegate would be there for. Would be to stop them from actually winning. And if there's riots, it's too bad, right? It's that's what the superdelegates are there for, right? And this, like I say, it's ultimately a question of what you think democracy is, right? The American form of democracy, which is not a form of direct democracy, in fact, it's a republic, really requires some checks in the form of things like bills of rights, constitutions, procedural rules, and in this case, superdelegates, right? You could bring the concept of the tyranny of majorities, and et cetera, et cetera. You could also argue that it's designed to uphold, sort of the party status quo, and there's certainly plenty of people yelling about stuff like that going back quite a long ways. That's why they changed the system to what it is right now, supposedly, right? But I don't want to reject it outright, but a political party is not going to be very successful if it's ignoring the will of its voters, right? So, it's kind of a stupid idea to think that the party would just ignore everybody and put their own person in place, right? And that they would design a system so they could do that. It's nonsensical when you think about it for a minute. The purpose of the superdelegates is a check. I think that's pretty clear, right? Not some nefarious ploy, but a legitimate part of how the American political process is designed. And you see these kinds of things all over the American political process. Okay. You essentially cannot accomplish anything in Washington without a supermajority. Okay. You don't win votes in the United States with 50%. You win votes in the United States with 60%. Okay, that's how most of Washington works. It's the truth. So seeing the Democratic primary set up in a similar way, and if you do the math, it works out that she needs, I think it's 58.8, right, which is it's like a geometric series out of 60, right? If you subtract, 1 over x, and a sum of 1 over x as it's coming up, right? And you want to, because you've got to ask the question: what happens if you get, if you set the limit at 60, then what happens if you get to 59.8? Well, it's almost 60, but it's not 60, and then you get this ambiguity, right? If you set it at 58.8, it's not just less than 59. Sorry, it's not just less than 60. It's less than 59, right? And it's like a limit. I doubt they did any math, but that's what it looks like, anyways, right? It's like the closest that you can get to 60 without being 60, and still, not have these kinds of questions arise, right? So, I'm not even an American, but if I was, and I was a Democrat, I really wouldn't have any fundamental pushback against the idea of superdelegates. And if you look at things I said a few months ago, I've remained consistent. What I would argue is that the way that the system works right now, which is that superdelegates make their choices, before people even start voting, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. What I would argue is that when you have a tie like this, and it's a tie because nobody got to 2383, okay, but when you have a tie, those votes should be up for persuasion. That's what Sanders is really arguing, right? So instead of walking into the convention with superdelegates having decided that they were going to vote a specific way months and months ago, because nobody actually won, because winning means getting to 2383, and nobody's going to get there. that's when the superdelegate process should kick in. There should be a competition for them, and then whoever wins the superdelegates wins the outcome. Because winning is not 50%, winning is not leading. Okay, those are concepts that apply to direct democracy, which is not what the United States is. The United States is a constitutional republic that requires a supermajority for almost everything. Okay, winning means getting to 60%, and if Clinton doesn't get to 60%, then I think there's a very strong argument that she doesn't win. Even if she has more votes, even if she's over 50%, she hasn't actually reached the threshold, right? And that's, it's like I say, it's not a direct democracy type of concept of democracy. But if you're sitting around trying to apply direct democracy to the United States, then you're not living in reality, because nothing in the United States follows those rules. Everything in Washington operates on supermajorities. It would be strange if this didn't. Really. That's the truth of it, right? So that should be what's happening right now, okay? They shouldn't be going into the convention with the result determined. They should be going into the convention with the result to be determined, and the result should be determined at the convention through a competition for support through party elders, because neither candidate got to a supermajority, right? So I think he's right. And I think that anybody that sits down and thinks it through with a proper understanding of American history, not a naive concept of direct democracy, anybody that does this properly and really looks it through and understands it, and gets the whole Jeffersonian slant and everything, they should see that he's right. And the more you think about it, and the more you analyze it, the more you realize how right he is. You sit down and you do the research, you'll learn things that you didn't understand before about how the system works, and you'll realize how much more sense what he's saying makes. So why heap shit on him when it's so obvious that he's actually right? Okay? Now, in a sense, she is right too. The polls are not really predictive yet. Although, we're kind of getting there. It's the NMA. More to the point is that they're volatile. You can't look at the reason that the polls are not predictive right now is that they're all over the place. If they were running in a straight line, you start to think things are locking into place. Although, I mean, that can always change too, right? I'd rather take a good snapshot over a polling aggregate. I think that one good poll the day of is better than averaging out 10 million over the last month. But I mean, we're months away, right? A snapshot poll today tells you what people are thinking today, and because everything is all over the place and volatile, there's really not any good reason to think that's what people are going to be thinking tomorrow, let alone 6 months from now. So if they were running in a straight line, you start to think things are locking into place, but they're not. Instead, there's a lot of movement right now. Okay, so she is right on that sense. But he's also right in pointing out that he has much, much stronger fundamentals with swing voters who couldn't vote in some of the more important states. So when she says, she got 3 million more votes, that's incredibly misleading. Okay? He really is the stronger candidate. And if this process was functioning properly, rather than as a coronation, as he said here, he called it an anointment, the party would walk into the convention with the outcome being a tie, weigh the evidence, and make the right choice, which many are suggesting is Sanders, right? So that's my point here. In fact, it's even going a little bit further than Sanders is taking it. If this system was operating the way that it was designed to operate, in a constitutional republic with checks and balances and supermajorities like it should be, the party wouldn't be walking into the convention with the understanding that Clinton has won, but would be walking into the convention with the understanding that the results of the voters was an undetermined outcome, and there needs to be tie-breaking procedures put in place so that the party brass can be convinced as to which candidate is stronger. And voters should not get upset about that, but should rather acknowledge that that's the role of these officials in this circumstance. When you have an unclear primary result, what else are they going to do? Play rock, paper, scissors? This is their job. It's what they do, right? And I'll take a little bit of the direct democracy argument. I will say that if somebody walks into a convention and they've got 56%, there'd better be a pretty strong argument for reversing that, right? Ultimately, the superdelegates would have to put their stamp on it and say, okay, this it's not someone crazy like Donald Trump or something. This person's acceptable to the party and the party people, right? And if you don't want that process, then you shouldn't run on a party. That's what they're not. They have their own interests. That's why they have a party, right? But when you have something like, from what I can see, like we should expect the outcome to be something like 52-48 or even 51-49, because I think he's going to do quite well in California. And if the end result is something like that, where the leader has 51%, 52%, then the strength of her lead is not so strong, and there should be more room for the superdelegates to maneuver in deciding which of these two candidates they want to elevate to a supermajority. Again, I'm not pretending this is direct democracy, but it would be you that's pretending that the United States is a direct democracy when there's nothing remotely of the sort anywhere in the country. This is what I'm describing is the way that an American system should work, based on the rules of American democracy, which are not direct democracy anywhere. It's all about checks and balances and supermajorities. So Sanders is right again, and I know that a lot of his supporters don't even like that logic, but he has a habit of being right, even not when what he's saying is not popular, and that's what's going on here. We're not that far north, so it's 9 o'clock at night. In fact, I didn't get any editing done either because I crashed. So I'm out of here. You're gonna see the show. This is a math rock band, kind of vaguely Crimson-esque. I'm thinking that the first band is probably on a 9. Hoping to catch the second. We'll see how this turns out. So yeah, I can't remember what I said a few minutes ago, but I crashed. I'm pretty sure it was because of the weather again. It's a nice, it's almost summer, it's still spring. Like, it still feels like spring. But hopefully this is the last night like that. Sorry, hand's a little cold on the drink. So, just trying to get some nice shots of the night because shooting star there. Couple. Are those? No, those gotta be. I bet they're chemtrails. Um, they're jets, though, for sure. But the high today was like 19, so that's warm enough for Buddy upstairs to get his air on. But it was like 15 by 5 o'clock, so it's cold enough for me to start shivering. So I gotta crank the heat up, and you get the tug of war between the air conditioner and the heater, which just zonks me right out. I've got cause and effect. Seems to do it every time. So I do hope that today is the last time I have to deal with that, because we should be getting some high humidity days starting tomorrow. We should be able to get all the dry air out of there. Well, I guess I'll be home most of the day tomorrow. I should be able to start that tomorrow. But it is going to be a little too cold overnight, according to the forecast right now. And, well, I gotta make my choice. Relatively early, right? I can't make the choice when I wake up tomorrow. So, I think it's already been made. It's going to be too cold to avoid pants tomorrow. So, I will indeed have to wear pants tomorrow. Some more sky. Those they're like little power naps. So when you get up from, I'm usually awake, and today's no different. Maybe a little groggy for the first hour or so, but then I'm awake. And it's actually it's pleasant out, because it's not like I say, it's very nearly summer. Almost feels like summer. It's just a few degrees too cold. I think the low tonight is 13. But like right now it's like 15. Right? If it was like 18, it would feel like I'm walking through a summer night. So. But I went over this once before, that you can get this temperature walking at this time of night pretty much any day of the year. Well, almost anyways. Probably won't happen in January. It's really the only time of the year you can be pretty sure is the middle of January. But even that's not really certain. Anyways, I'm going to put this away and finish my drink while I'm walking. I say I should be there a little after 9. I'm only going to see the one band, math rock act that I said vaguely Crimson. It's you can tell that the blue is a strong influence, which is nice to hear actually. He's a little bit I don't want to say he's underrated. If anything, I might argue he's overrated. But when I say that, I might argue he's overrated. What I mean is he's overrated relative to his actual influence. He ends up on all the lists and everything, but when you actually listen to people play, you don't hear a lot of them. So it's nice to hear the some of the potential that people have been pulling out for decades actually actualizing itself in an actual emulation. I did. Well, I'm early, so my choices are I can either sit in there and start the wall, or I can go home and get another rock star, and I'm going to do that. It's going to be some wandering around Windsor tonight, actually. That's what it appears like. It's actually quiet. Like I say, it's not even 10, so it's early, but we'll see how this works out. On second thought, that seems like it's not going to be necessary. I'm just going to head back to the bar and sit down. Enjoy. But yeah, I was going to point out that this is the long weekend here in Canada, and it's pretty quiet downtown. I can't remember if I was out here the last couple of years on this particular night in Windsor. I don't tend to celebrate holidays, you probably noticed. But I know in Ottawa you would expect it to be a little more, expect there to be more people. you have to wonder if maybe people are hanging out in Detroit instead, which on some level would make sense, but it's kind of like Canadian holiday party in Detroit. Eh. But I mean, there's the Memorial Day weekend too, so I guess it often coincides, right? Maybe being nationalistic is kind of silly when you think about it too, right? I don't know. But it's more just reacting to the surprise of there not being more people out on the long weekend like this. I guess it kind of is reflective of the city's size though too, right? I don't know. I know I'm going to go enjoy the show. So I was feeling pretty chill, so I stayed for Blessed, the band from Vancouver that was playing tonight. It was a better presentation live than I was expecting. It sounded more like a, like a kind of a, almost like Joy Division-ish post-punk band. In the samples online, but it was kind of a grunge band, mathy grunge. 90s indie, but with a bit of a roar. Very different. I suppose it's probably new material, or maybe I just misheard it. I've done that before. You listen to it and you're not really paying attention and you kind of get the right idea. But it was better than expected anyways. But now I'm feeling kind of sobered up, so I'm gonna head home. Maybe have a bagel, that's what I'm thinking. And see what kind of work I can get. I still have some editing to do, that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Okay, so the first band was, they were a little less spastic than I think they could have been, but they were also a little bit more expansive than I was expecting. So, there were some points where I was kind of wondering, okay, why are you doing that when you could be doing something else, kind of thing. Like, it kind of seemed like at points they were falling into cliches, and it was more like in a pandering sense. But overall, it worked out, despite I think maybe some questionable decisions there. But I'd say it's worth the $5 if you want to go see it. The second band, like I say, I was expecting it to be almost like a... The recording seems to have been trying to capture like a Joy Division sound, or at least that's what I got out of it. But at the same time, it was kind of poppy. There was a little bit of that at the show, but overall it was more of a live organic rock band sound, and in fact it was a little bit mathy too. A little bit like kind of like mathy, but with like a grunge kick. It was well done as well. So I enjoyed both of those, both worth the $5. I skipped the last band just because I kind of felt like going home, and I didn't really. I guess if I could have stayed and bought a beer, I would have stayed and bought a beer. But I just was feeling like, okay, I got the night done, time to go home. It's really hot in here, or at least it feels really hot in here. It'll even out in a few minutes. It always does. I probably should have turned the heat down a little before I went out, but I was reacting to the air conditioner, like I said, and everything else, right? So, a little bit of editing, and I think that's it for the night. I should also point out that the math rock band gave me a mixtape. Cool. Didn't even ask for it. It was just like, hey, take this. So it's cool. I think for something like this, like, what am I going to do with this? It's going to like sit on my shelf forever, kind of thing. But I don't know. You don't wonder what the motive for that is, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense for me a little bit to have something, obscure like that just sitting. But why hand it to me? I don't know. But thanks. Yeah, some editing, and that's about it. She talked about guns in classrooms. I don't want to have guns in classrooms, although in some cases teachers should have guns in classrooms, frankly. You look at some of our schools, unbelievable what is going on. But I'm not advocating guns in classrooms. But remember, in some cases, trained teachers should be able to have guns in classrooms. It's a quote from the presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump. And it's a little hard to make sense of, I think. We can all see that. I just don't know what logic system Trump uses. What's the status of De Morgan's laws here? Are we gonna get a paper here, Donald, or can you try and explain what type of logic I should be using to try to decode this? You know what? Maybe we can try and use an artificial intelligence on the D-Wave system to decode it. A couple extra states might help, right? I mean, I know that when it's claimed that nobody understands quantum physics, maybe Trump is really such a genius that he's living it. Not the fuck, really, what the hell? And you doubted that funding for NASA would be useful, huh? Oh, ye of little faith. We have found a use. All of those millions dropped into NASA finally have come to fruition. We need to set a Manhattan Project in motion to decode the logic system used by Donald Trump. So Trump wants to get rid of Dodd-Frank and just let the investors on Wall Street do whatever they want. That's what he's saying, huh? Self-regulation? The guy can't even self-regulate his own hair. Anyways, they're talking about it a little bit, and they're saying that this is stupid. But then at the end, they point out that it might actually help them with investors. Allowing investors to do what they want might be beneficial for investors. Some investors. I've seen enough writing from enough investors that say, we need rules because they're investors. And they want easier to understand rules so that when they put their money in whatever place, they have a better chance of understanding what's actually happening to it, right? When the rules are made up, with every transaction, it's easy to get burned. But anyways, at the end he points out that, at least some investors would like to see would like to see the whole concept of regulation just ignored, right? And so I tell them, yeah, you got it at the end. It's exceedingly cynical. And while I don't dispute the claim that Trump is making making the same errors as the people he just beat, which is kind of daft. If you look at this from a kind of vulgar Marxist or even Gramscian perspective, then it actually makes a lot of sense. See, it all turns into the following question. Does the media cover elections, or does the media decide elections? If you take the latter perspective and you're Donald Trump right now, you have to realize that the number one problem you have in front of you is that you're not the establishment candidate. So you don't have establishment money on your side. So you don't have establishment media on your side. Now, I just want to point out that this isn't about like quantity of media. This is about quality of media, right? You could be on MSNBC every day, and for an hour every morning. You could be on the morning show for an hour every day, And if what they do is they spend that time making fun of you, you know, like is being covered by Jon Stewart, is that good media, right? So I mean, you've got, I they say that, all media is good media, except for when you're running for president, right? You don't want bad media when you're running for president. So what I'm getting across is not, how much media he can generate. I don't think he's going to have difficulty generating media. It's a question of whether this media is going to be on his side or opposed to him. And if you think there's any sort of, stark ideological, alignments here, you're kind of out to lunch. Would MSNBC support Trump if it was financially beneficial to them? Sure. Would CNN support Trump if the money was on their side? Yeah, they would. Right. So that's kind of what this is about, right? It's about not. It's not about ensuring that there's a large, total amount of media. It's about ensuring that the media that exists is positive. He wants the coverage he gets on these mainstream, 24-hour news networks. He wants them to be positive, right? He wants all of these Clinton operatives to become his operatives. He wants all the money that they give to the Clintons to come to him. And that's what he's going to identify as his major problem. He doesn't have the establishment money, so he doesn't have the establishment media. CNN could run tons of coverage on him, but expect most of it to be negative. And if you watch some of it, you'll see it already. Right? Just the way that they talk about, the way they frame things, right? The quote-unquote analysis is often hit jobs, right? And, you expect that, because, Clinton might not have been their first choice, but she's certainly a better choice for them than Trump is, right? So, if that's Trump's perspective, and no doubt is, then he realizes that he's fucked. Because what decides elections is the way the media frames them, and he's on the outside. And the way you see the outcome from this perspective is obvious. Clinton, MSNBC, and CNN gang up on him and beat him into the ground, while Fox continues to spurn out punchlines for late-night TV. And Trump, no doubt, doesn't help himself either. Now, I am in some ways regurgitating the liberal media conspiracy theory that you hear on the right a lot. But let's remember that I would not call Clinton a liberal. And I would not consider the media that is generated by the Clinton / MSNBC / CNN sort of alliance. To call that liberal media would be ridiculous. You'd have to be somewhere to the right of Bismarck before that turns into liberal media, right? In fact, I would be more likely to use the term conservative media and say that Clinton has the conservative media in her pocket. What I'm getting at is that regardless of how you frame the arrangement, whether you want to call it liberal or conservative or just corporatist, it does exist. And I think that anybody that's really paying attention knows it exists. The big networks are very, very clearly on Clinton's side. They might not be liberals, she might not be a liberal, but they're on her side nonetheless, okay? Now, this does seem to contradict the narrative. They claim he won because he's the anti-establishment. But that was the primary. There's different rules in the primary, and I've been clear that I don't think that's true anyways. I don't think he won because he was the anti-establishment. I don't think he was the anti-establishment. I don't think his voters saw him as the anti-establishment, okay? And if you look at what he was saying, he didn't run as an anti-establishment candidate. He was the one that was, less ridiculous about taxes, less ridiculous about abortion. It was Cruz that ran as the anti-establishment candidate, and Trump beat him by running in the center, by coming across as less extreme. He didn't control the outside of the Republican Party. He didn't control the outsider vote. He controlled the mainstream of the Republican Party and the center of the vote. Okay, so the proper way to adjust to that is actually to go after the center and the general, which means becoming the establishment. And I would claim that he already committed to this tactic several weeks ago. That is how Trump will win, if he can win. It's almost impossible, but that's how he does it, right? So, I mean, you can argue that it's going to mean he's throwing away the Sanders vote, like it was ever serious, right? I have argued that it's only real tactic, but it's based on the idea that he just doesn't have any space to operate on Hillary's right. It's too narrow. So, whether in recognition of that or not, it does seem that he's realizing that he doesn't really have any space to run in on her right, and instead is trying to knock her off the spot and take over and become the establishment. And of course, if he can somehow do that, then he becomes the establishment candidate and he gains the spoils. The pundits on NBC start saying nice things about him. The pundits on CNN stop questioning him. Because it's not about ideology, and it's not even really about ratings. It's about money, right? And if he gets the right people behind him, then he changes the media narrative. And then he wins, because that's what wins elections, is media narratives. Now, how exactly he thinks he's going to manage this while carrying through his other ideas is hard to parse, of course. But what it exposes is the tactical impossibility that he really faces. He's not going to win an election as an anti-establishment candidate. Okay? Nobody is ever going to win the presidency as the anti-establishment. Is absurd. Okay? You win primaries like that from time to time. When situations arise, you don't win general elections like that. It's never going to happen. Okay? And he knows that. There may be some pundits that don't know that, but they probably do really know that. And here's another sort of thing to think about. Okay, you could say that, but he's gonna get the people on MSNBC to all of a sudden start saying really nice things about him. All the Clinton surrogates on CNN are going to start supporting Trump now. How does that happen, right? Well, look what happened with Megyn Kelly at Fox. Fox started off totally hostile to them, but the coverage changed as the situation unfolded. And the responses changed as well. Why is Trump up a little bit in the polling? Because he was taken in by Fox News, and he was presented to people as the establishment. Why was he doing... So all the people that Fox had worked up against him are now aligning with him because the TV changed its mind. Is that completely true? Is that the only factor? It probably has a big part of it, right? I mean, I don't like these, kind of Gramscian ideas about, people just think whatever they're, whatever's pushed down. I think it's an oversimplification. But I think it happens to be with Trump's voting base specifically. There's probably more to it than there would be in other voting bases, right? Because the people on the right specifically, a lot of them really are led very strongly by what they see on TV. So we saw this on the right. We saw what Fox just did. We saw the outcome. And, I mean, that's going to embolden them, right? You can say, look, it's working. Now let me go after Wall Street money, which will get me good coverage on CNN, and then I'll win them too. It's not a foolish way to think, but I think that he will run into the surprise that conservatives are a lot easier to lead than independents or centrists or liberals are. Which itself is not an accident. They've been trained that way, right? What this means is that it might seem like he's throwing away his advantage on the surface, but what he's actually really doing is cutting his losses and going in all in, right? What he's saying is, I can't win as an anti-establishment. Okay, let's take this whole thing, this whole character, let's set it off into the, down the river, and I'm going all in. I'm the banker candidate. I'm the big money candidate. Put money in my super PAC. I'm moderate on all these issues, but we'll build the wall, and etc. Right? Just throwing that all away, throwing away all this stuff that he knows is just going to hurt him, and going all in as the candidate that the establishment is willing to support. And thus it's risky, right? He could end up with nothing. But it's also high reward. It's probably the only chance he's really got. Not dumb, but definitely reflective of a lack of good options. It's 7:30 and I have to admit I didn't get much done last night. Mostly just screwing around on the internet when I got home. Time to get some sleep. Up in the afternoon, and second last show day for the month. Like I say, the shows are going to tone down after July. Or sorry, after the 1st of June. I want to get some actual work done, and that's fine. It's going to be a long time before I go to 9 shows in a month. Let's just be clear about that, right? So, a few more, and then I'm back to work.